You know, we're all about the data, folks. That's why when it comes to analyzing early voting trends, polling data, we're not speculating here on the MeidasTouch Network. We bring you the top experts in the field. We brought you Tom Bonnier, Simon Rosenberg, Matthew Dowd. And as we start looking, though, inside the states themselves, the incredible local news coverage that's taking place in states like Michigan with incredible editors like Chad Livengood, who we had on before. They know the data. They live there. They've seen the speeches. They're in the communities. I want to bring in Chad Livengood, politics editor for the Detroit News. Now, Chad, you and I spoke about a month ago, and at that time, maybe a little longer ago, your polling showed Donald Trump +1. Now in your polling, we see a 4-point movement in the opposite direction towards Vice President Kamala Harris. A poll before this also showed this, but it's remained remarkably consistent, though, as we're in the final stretch. She's up 47 to 44% in your most recent poll. Let's just start there. I then want to go into some of these big Republican endorsements of Vice President Kamala Harris that we're seeing and some other developments. But tell us about the data, your recent findings.
Yeah, I mean, this poll shows Harris with this 3-point lead, and it has remained consistent. And what's really started to really take hold here is a massive gender gap that we have not seen in Michigan politics in presidential elections. At least our pollster in 40 years of doing surveys in Michigan. Right now, in our most recent poll for Detroit News, WDIV, Harris had a lead of 58-34 among female voters, and Trump had a lead of 55-34 among male voters. This is significant. One, I mean, it's going to be hard for Trump to overcome the female vote here, the deficit. Also because there are just simply more female voters. If they outnumber men, they make up 51% of the voting population or the registered voters in Michigan. And so Harris walks into Election Day with this advantage. Then we have right now ongoing in-person early voting going on. And we already have 500,000 votes from in-person early voting, plus 1.7 million votes have already been turned in from absentee ballots. So, 2.2 million and counting ballots in. We figure there's going to be probably upwards of 5 million, if not more, votes in Michigan. And so, by the end of the day tomorrow, half the votes for Michigan will already be in. So this is no longer a persuasion game. This is very much a turnout game.
And not just in your polling, but in the early votes itself, we're seeing that gender gap as well, huh? I mean, I think I saw recently, based on those who have early voted, women are out and about and voting. I think it was like +12 amongst the early vote. What do you make of that?
Yeah, our poll did find an advantage. Harris with absentee voting, Harris was getting 63% of the absentee voters to Trump's 33%. So a 30-point gap. Just in asking people if you've already voted, and if so, who you voted for. And so just look at that and extrapolate it on the statewide level. It would stand to reason that Harris walks in with maybe 2/3 of her votes essentially on Election Day, and doesn't have to make up for it. Doesn't have to, just in case it rains or something. I mean, there's just any number of things can go wrong. I mean, today it's like record high 78 degrees in mid Michigan. Crazy warm weather for the 30th of October, but last year at Halloween, my kid was walking through snow, so anything can go wild here in the weather at the end of October, early November.
And Chad, when you're talking about absentee votes, are you using that as a catch-all for the kind of early vote by is that a catch-all?
Well, that's the in Michigan, that's the mail-in vote, and now we have this early in-person vote. So this 2.2 million figure is is the combined figure. It's 1.7 million of them is the mail-in vote so far. So we have a large number of mostly seniors, and people have just gotten used to no reason absentee voting the last couple of cycles, and so they're permanently on a list now. They get their absentee ballot in the mail the last weekend of September, and they start sending it in, and so. Yeah, there's still like a good 650,000 absentee votes out there. So the chase is on still to get people to send their ballots in.
Chad, what I find interesting though too is that more so than 2020, there does seem to be more Republican voters though voting early or by absentee than when they just were basically told not to do it in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to your data about what you've seen still amongst that data set, that actually looks more Republican in terms of the raw data, the raw number of actual Republican voters v. Democrat voters that are out there. You're still getting that 30 plus margin in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris, which I find interesting. Am I reading too much into that, or is that, who knows?
Well, our poll did show that Trump had, when we asked him if you're voting absentee, early in person, or election day, and in political parlance, they call this the absentee ballot, AB, or early voters, EV, and then election day, ED. For and so I'll get a prop here from the stacks of political mail I've been getting here in the 7th congressional district. This is a good example here. Trump, their mailer shows encourages people to vote early, to vote by mail and vote early. I mean, this is completely opposite, obviously, of what he said. He's trashed early voting. In fact, even though he's telling people to do this, just over the weekend in Novi, Michigan, he told people to vote early, and then he called the whole system ridiculous. I mean, it was kind of a mixed message, to say the least. But this mailer from the Michigan Republican Party, my wife and I have gotten like 3 or 4 different versions of this so far. So they're sending this out to a lot of Democrats are getting it. They're sending it to just all kinds of households, blanketing mailboxes and trying to encourage people, because they know, like, when they're down 30 points on absentee votes, this is a huge deficit that's going to be hard to overcome on election day.
You mentioned the Republican Party. We've been following here the interesting developments in the Michigan Republican Party, an exiled Republican head fighting and warring with different factions. And I think we've covered even like physical fist fights in Michigan with certain people. But, the old guard Republican Party with people like Rusty Hills, former director of Michigan GOP, and advisor to Michigan AG Bill Schwett. He came out supporting Vice President Kamala Harris. We've seen a number of high-profile old guard Michigan Republicans come out in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris. I guess, number one, does that surprise you? 2, do you think that's having an impact based on the data that we're talking about?
I was actually a little surprised by Rusty Hills. I've known him for many years. He was sort of counselor to the former Attorney General Bill Schuette, who was the Republican nominee for governor just 6 years ago. And Rusty comes out of the John Engler machine, essentially, the former 3-term Republican governor. Engler, he's not really actively out for Trump, but he's out trying to sort of tell people like democracy works, but he hasn't really actually made any kind of endorsement, kind of curiously. But for Rusty to come out, he is kind of he is definitely like one of the counselors to the old guard, and so there's a number of former Republican officials, former Congressman Joe Schwartz, a number of other longtime Republican aides and hands in Lansing who have, and then the other big one is the former congressman from Southwest Michigan, Fred Upton. And Upton, famously voted to impeach Trump for January 6th as kind of one of his last stands, and probably one of the reasons why he didn't run for re-election in 2022, because he knew that Trump would have run somebody against him, and he probably could have lost his seat. And just as we saw what happened with the freshman Republican from Grand Rapids, Peter Meyer, who did also vote with Upton for the impeachment and the second impeachment, and then lost to a Trump appointed or a favored candidate in the Republican primary.
Politics, of course, is local. And so when Donald Trump gives these broad, or J.D. Vance give these broad messages about the way they talk about the Green New Scam, and we're going to shut down factories that do EV and all of these things, I mean, people in Michigan actually, I think, have seen a bit of a manufacturing boom with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the Infrastructure Act. So, one of the things that you've been reporting on is that the messaging has this incongruity to what people actually are experiencing in Michigan. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, that's my factory that you're saying to shut down. Wait a minute, there was no jobs here, and now there's a massive EV plant. Or when you're talking about tariffs, we have intimate knowledge that that's specifically going to raise prices. You're not tricking us in Michigan. We know what a tariff means and what it doesn't mean. So stop saying that it's not going to raise prices. We know here. We manufacture stuff. We import stuff. We know it's a tax. Yep. So how much of the kind of, I guess, unforced errors or intentionally forced errors by the Trump campaign to pursue this line? Talk through that. And do you think that's kind of what we're seeing in this +4 shift, that since that last poll, it seems like they've been making stop after stop, kind of crapping on Michigan and crapping on the city and crapping all over the state?
Yeah, I mean, definitely has been continued to, back 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump went to the Detroit Economic Club and made a bunch of disses on Detroit in a way that was kind of, this was a real popular thing for any politician to do for many, many years. It got a lot of pushback, mostly from Democrats in the city and whatnot. But we did some polling in our polling. We asked voters in Michigan, how do you feel about Detroit? And Detroit actually, the people's right track, wrong track on Detroit, as in a statewide poll, it was higher than what people felt about the rest of the state, which was, we've never seen this before. And in Metro Detroit, it was almost 60% of people in the entire Southeast Michigan region think Detroit's on the right track. So it's a total contradiction to Trump's message that he's coming in and saying the city hasn't really seen a real comeback. And if you elect me, I'll deliver it. And so that's one area. The other area that is kind of a little harder for, I think it's harder for Democrats to completely message, understand, and get to everybody sort of on a mass level. But this week there's an interesting story where Vice President Harris came to Saginaw County. Now on election night, Saginaw County is one to watch. The candidates are spending a lot of time there. I expect them to be back there this weekend as well. And in Saginaw, it's a kind of perennial bellwether county. The Biden administration has just recently announced 2 major federal subsidies, investments for the manufacturing of semiconductors, and they're both related to Corning Inc. One is to expand semiconductor manufacturing on one side of a road in Saginaw County, where there's already an existing plant there called Hemlock Semiconductor. On the other side of the road, Corning wants to build a brand new plant to build the wafers for solar panels. So this is clean energy jobs of the future. We're talking about 1,100 jobs coming to Saginaw County, in addition to this other investment just on the other side of the road. Same company, 2 different types of onshoring of jobs, things that have been done in China, coming to Saginaw County, and so it has this real potential to be transformative for the economy there. It has been very, very dependent upon auto supplier jobs for many years, fallen on hard times. It's part of the I-75 corridor, in the heart of the 8th congressional district, which is also by the way, a swing district that's up for grabs. And so I think this is kind of a really interesting thing, but not necessarily something that is easy to totally explain to the general public.
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the bigger, broader issues that we talk about. What you mentioned right there, it's policy, it's specific, it's jobs, it's, getting into the nooks and crannies of local economies and how you're helping, specific people in the area versus, look, you guys famously reported when Donald Trump came into town lately, he had people behind him wearing auto workers for Trump shirts. And then your reporters who were there, your reporter who was there, Craig Mauger, he said he interviewed some of these people and he said, hey, are you an auto worker? And he found that at least a number of those people were actually not auto workers when he spoke to them. So they were literally cosplaying. I mean, this to me is the hardest part for me, I guess, as an outsider to understand, because if someone cosplayed like stuff that's so near and dear to my life, like it would be a deal breaker. But like Trump comes into Michigan, dresses people up in fake auto worker shirts, has them pretend to be auto workers. And then, as you explained, in contrast, you've got, Biden Harris with very detailed, specific policies with plants that are opening up. One's easier to message, but it's a total fugazi. The other one is hard to mention, but it's delivering jobs. So is this breaking through, or is that the dilemma? Is that the $1.5 billion question? I think that's what the race is going to cost.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a costly a dilemma here. But getting through to people, I mean, and actually having like real auto workers show up. I mean, I think one of the problems that Trump has with auto workers is, particularly unionized auto workers, they're not out and wearing it on their sleeves. I mean, they face pressure within their union to stay quiet about it, or they think they do. And so there are some vocal activists out there within the ranks of the United Auto Workers, but they just don't speak out too often. So I think that's one of the unknowns here is, do they show up at the ballot box and punish Harris or the Biden administration for whatever reason, even though there is all these activities going on from the federal level to create new investment in manufacturing, both in the auto industry and these new sectors. I mean, this thing in Saginaw County, this is not directly related to the manufacturing of vehicles. The semiconductors, the chips could go into vehicles, but it's not reliant upon the sale of trucks and SUVs like the rest of Michigan's economy is very much wrapped around. So that's what makes this somewhat transformational for a place like Saginaw County to get this type of investment, both by the company and also from the federal government.
Chad Livengood, Detroit News. I really appreciate your reporting. I mean, the local journalism that you do in the state, it gives me hope that journalism is alive and well, even if I'm a little bit disappointed in the coverage at the national level by other corporate media. I mean, you guys, the good, the bad, the ugly, regardless of the political party, what's best for Michigan, holding people accountable, and you've got a great team that works with you. So thanks for everything that you do there. And everybody, subscribe to the Detroit News, even if you're not from there. Get some real news from Chad and his team. So thanks for joining us, Chad.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 4 million subscribers. Have a good one.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.